Ike Ibeabuchi was a heavyweight contender from the 1990s. He's a fighter who at one point in time was considered a future heavyweight champion, with some impressive wins over solid contenders such as Chris Bird and David Tua. He seemed a sure thing to at least have a good heavyweight title run. However, as I'm sure many of you already know, it wasn't meant to be, and like so many other fighters, Ike ran into some serious personal problems away from the ring and became another what if in boxing, being forced to retire from the sport in his prime. Nordic Warrior here, hope you guys are all doing well. Welcome back to my retrospective boxing series. So today we're going to be talking about the undefeated former heavyweight contender Ike Ibeabuchi, also known as the President. So Ike Ibeabuchi turned professional in late 1994 in the heavyweight division. He was originally from Nigeria, however relocated to America and resides there to this day. In the early part of his pro career, he had a string of victories against lower level journeymen, mostly by knockout, and was developing a reputation as a solid, aggressive KO puncher with a high work rate and a ferocious style. He didn't fight the best competition in the early part of his career, but he did face a couple of durable guys with winning records, and looked pretty good against them. After his first 16 pro fights, he took a major step up in class, taking on the dangerous Samoan knockout artist David Tua. Tua was coming off of a TKO victory over the Russian future WBC champion Oleg Maskayev, and was a sizable favourite to beat Ike. The fight was a fantastic brawl, with both guys throwing everything they had at each other, and I believe the fight even broke the record at the time for the number of punches thrown in a heavyweight fight. Ike went on to win the fight by a clear but competitive unanimous decision, giving David Tua the first defeat of his career. After beating Tua, Ike had a couple of stoppage wins against journeymen Tim Ray and Everton Davis, before taking on the toughest test of his career, the undefeated contender and future heavyweight champion Chris Bird. In a performance that really exceeded expectations, Ike dominated the fight and brutally knocked Bird out in the 5th round. It seemed at that point like he was going to have a great career and was not too far away from a shot at the heavyweight title. However, sadly for him, his personal inner demons got the better of him, and he ended up having a mental breakdown, getting himself locked up and ending his boxing career indefinitely. There were some rumours here and there that he would be making a comeback when he got out of prison, but the comeback never materialised. So how good was Ike Ibeabuchi? How would he have done in today's era, or any era besides his own? And more specifically, how would his career have gone if he had gotten his issues sorted out and gotten the big fights of his era? Let's talk about it. Sadly, in regards to Ike's overall ability, there isn't really a whole lot of material to go on, because as I mentioned before, his career was sadly cut short in his prime, and the only real fights he had worth talking about are the ones he had against Chris Bird and David Tua. It's interesting that those are the guys he beat too, because those guys have one thing in common: they were both relatively small heavyweights. Not in terms of build and weight in Tua's case, but certainly in terms of dimensions such as height and reach. They were shorter and more crude than a lot of the best modern heavyweights, and even some of the best heavyweights of that era. So we never really saw Ike fight a taller, elite level heavyweight, which he would certainly have had to do at some point. Based on his destruction of Chris Bird, and the way he was able to outfight Tua, a lot of boxing fans seem to think that Ike would have beaten Lennox Lewis, and many fans think he would have beaten the Klitschko brothers. The logic behind this is that Chris Bird of course went on to beat Vitali for his world title, and despite losing to Vladimir twice, he went the distance in the first fight and lasted a little bit longer in the second fight against Vlad than he did against Ike. Me on the other hand, let's just say I'm skeptical about that. While I agree that Ike's toughness, durability, power and stamina would have made him a tough fight for anybody, I still think that he would likely have struggled against an elite level boxer with a size advantage and legit athleticism. Say what you want about Lennox Lewis, but on a good night he was one of the most well-rounded heavyweights of all time. His punching power, physical strength and presence in the ring was phenomenal, and he also had the technical ability to back it up. I personally believe that Ike would have really struggled with the jab, length and boxing skills of Lennox Lewis, just like Tua did when he fought Lewis, and I would have actually favoured Lewis to beat Ike in dominant fashion. In regards to Vitali Klitschko, he may have lost to Chris Bird when they fought, but let's be honest guys, that loss was one of the biggest flukes in boxing history. Vitali was well in control of that fight until his shoulder went and he had to be pulled out in the corner. Not only that, but it's clear that Bird was a much more improved fighter at that point, and he had definitely settled into the heavyweight division a lot better by the time he fought Vitali. And it cannot be denied that, just like Lewis, Vitali had some major advantages over Ike. Vitali was taller than Lewis, had quicker feet, and an even better chin, and had great stamina himself for a big man. Vitali was also a very technically astute fighter, with a good understanding of the sport, who improved after every single fight. I think if that fight had happened, providing Vitali was healthy, I personally think he would have completely schooled Ike. Vladimir, on the other hand, would have been a more interesting fight. While Vladimir developed into the most dominant heavyweight champion of all time later in his career, peaking in the mid to late 2000s in my opinion. In the late 90s and early 2000s, Vlad had quite a few problems and flaws that needed to be ironed out, and Ike may have done to him what Corey Sanders did, although I still wouldn't rule Vlad out in the fight because he was a much bigger man and a much better boxer than Ike was, even back then. The main reason for his fights against Chris Bird lasting longer, in my opinion, were a combination of Bird's technical improvements and Vlad's more cautious and defensive style of fighting. Vlad would often carry his opponents, controlling them with the jab and knocking them out later in fights after having them under control, giving him more confidence in his own ability to stop them. So basically, in short, on their best nights, I think the best heavyweights of Ike's era would have beaten him, but that's just my personal opinion. As far as how he would do in today's era, it would have been interesting to see an extremely tough, fit, aggressive pressure fighter like Ike against a lot of today's heavyweights, and I think he would have a great chance of beating some of the top contenders. But I think the elite guys in the division, such as Usyk or Fury, maybe would have figured him out, and probably outboxed him, beating him on points by a wide margin. I'd probably favour him over Anthony Joshua though. Could you imagine Joshua react well to Ike really putting it on him? I think AJ gets stopped. And as for Deontay Wilder, he could get knocked out by Ike in my opinion. In older eras of heavyweight boxing such as the 70s or 80s, where most of the fighters were smaller, less athletic and more crude, Ike would have been an absolute nightmare for most of them in my opinion. So that's pretty much all I have to say about Ike Ibeabuchi. It's a shame we really don't have a lot of material to go on, because I would really enjoy seeing how he would do against some of the world-class heavyweights with different styles, but unfortunately for us, we just don't have the fights because they never happened. Thanks for watching guys, I really enjoyed talking about Ike Ibeabuchi. Let me know what you guys think, stay tuned for more retrospective boxing videos. Thanks for watching and God bless.